Welcome to the U-Turn Podcast. This is the place to connect to who you truly are. We're bringing PhDs, experts, and leaders to help you elevate your mindset in your work life and in your love life so that you can see things differently and truly love your world. I'm Ashley Stahl. I'm a career expert, author, and TEDx speechwriter and booker, and I'm excited to bring you in to this week's episode.
Hi, U-Turn friends. It's Ash here, and I'm bringing Jess Burgio onto the show. She is a force field. She has her own podcast. It's called Unscripted. Couldn't have thought of a better name for what she's up to and who she is. Such a free spirit and also a holistic life and business coach. And she's so passionate about helping people find clarity, activate new levels of confidence. And obviously the intention there is so that people can take more action and pursue bigger dreams, bigger goals. Formerly, she owned a hair salon, correct? Hair salon. Mm-hmm. And was a beauty entrepreneur for 22 years. It's so wild. I'm so surrounded by beauty entrepreneurs these days. Am I in an anti-aging spiral? I don't know.
I hope so.
I hope so. And also, Jess has the Unscripted Mastermind. So that has been something that's really, really high impact for people who have found her. And she identifies as an author, a podcast mentor, a speaker, a mama. She's obsessed with helping entrepreneurs get the skills that they need to connect to their voice and their brand and go to for all things support systems and strategy. So friends, Jess has created a lot of magic through her podcast. And I want to talk, and we've talked about this a little bit before, of just personal brand. You hear me talk about TED Talks galore. And so today we were thinking we would talk to you a little bit about why podcasting is such a big deal, how to get started, thoughts to consider. So thanks so much, Jess, for coming on.
Oh my gosh, my favorite. I think you and I are just next level energy when we get together. It's just podcasting is easy. We're some long form, but we talk quick. We're we'll get you the info quick and dirty and help you take some action, which is what I'm all about.
Yeah, literally. I feel low key, I haven't really talked about this on the podcast, but I'm working on creating a beverage that's a party beverage that's no alcohol. And it's so funny because I feel I don't need that when I'm with you or a few other women. I'm I feel I'm on a party beverage right now.
We are the party.
We are the party. Okay, wait. So podcasting, you've done so many things, Jess. What is it that got you committed, interested to podcasting and focused on it?
It's interesting. Yeah, my story is weird and all over the place and, very similar to probably a lot of people's, but they just don't talk about it or have a platform to talk about it. Yeah, I got into the beauty industry when I was 19. A girlfriend of mine in high school was hey, you want to join this free program for going to beauty school? And I was sure, can't find anything else better to do. My mom didn't really pay attention to me in school, so grades weren't super great. I always felt smart, but just never had a real avenue to pursue stuff. Creativity was a little bit more my thing. I always wanted to dye my hair weird colors and do different things, but being able to be in the beauty industry, meet women, talk to them, quote unquote, hold space, which to me means really learn how to listen, right? Because Susie comes in and all of a sudden she wants to cut bangs and you're I've been doing your hair for 10 years. Why do you want bangs today? And then she starts crying, telling me about how everything's imploding in her life. It really allowed for me to learn how to listen to people and what they were actually saying, versus what they were pretending to share with me. So a lot of cool things learned behind the scenes with working with women and a lot of men too. And I think that gave me the strength and the power to be able to ask really good questions. And instead of finding myself being a nosy, I'm I'm just really curious. I want to know why. I've always been like that. And so that translated into becoming a really great podcaster when COVID gifted me some free space and time in my brand new studio that I had opened 6 months prior to being locked down. So previous to that, probably about a year prior, I'd been following Lori Harder for many years through the personal development space, been to many of her events. We knew each other from the fitness world. We used to do a lot of stuff with Strong Fitness magazine. So yeah, I've had my hand in beauty and styling and fitness. And then when she kind of pivoted from fitness into personal development, I was this is interesting. I want to go to that. And so that was kind of my first introduction, probably about 7-8 years ago, really, I guess it was 10 years ago now of what are these deeper conversations that people are willing to have and how can we learn from each other's mistakes and experiences and all the things? So in the interim of that, Chris Harder started a mastermind called Fast Foundations, which was an early stage entrepreneurship mastermind. And he used a key phrase one day when he was talking in his stories on social media. And he said, "This is really for my accidental entrepreneurs." And I was like, ooh, that's me. In beauty school, I wasn't thinking about being some grandiose entrepreneur with the fame that it kind of comes with now, or whatever mindset we have around entrepreneurship. I was like, I want a business where I can make my own hours, show up dressed like I want, and kind of lead a schedule and a life that I say is what I want. And like I said, that time was gifted to me after I had just opened my salon during that mastermind time. And Chris had started a podcast. Lori had started a podcast. I had bought a microphone about 2 years prior. I just couldn't figure out how to use GarageBand because, again, I'm 43, didn't really know how to use my computer. I was behind the chair cutting hair. So finally, I was like, done with the excuses, find someone to help me start the podcast, launch the show. I had a friend who was like a videographer who claimed he could do audio, and we learned that's not the case. Anyways, I recorded my first 25 episodes in person in my studio, not knowing what the heck I was doing. And I just started asking my friends who had closed salons too, like, what are you doing to survive? How's life going? And then we got to the deeper stuff of like, how did you become successful and all the things? And I really learned that because I was so curious and I love to ask questions and really listen, that made me a great interviewer, which made me a great podcaster. And so I just had to refine, what I sounded like, what I looked like. I'm kind of aggressive. So, overly friendly aggressive. So sometimes I sounded like I was upset or mad or kind of yelling. So just watching back my own tape, as you will, as an athlete, right? And kind of studying like, how do I like how I sound? Am I saying like too much? And just refining who I was as a podcaster. But it all started speaking to the beauty industry. And that's really where it started, from a pain point of not feeling like I could do anything to support my industry, feeling like I had to give it a voice. And so that pain pushed me to get out of my own way and start the show.
Beautiful. I feel like there's a lot of themes in what you're sharing. It's like the theme of purpose and the theme of like service when you don't even know how you're serving. Like the fact that you talk about Susie coming in, like wanting bangs, but it's not about the bangs. And you were somebody who was able to see that for her. I feel like there's a constant feedback that we're getting from the world around us of what we're supposed to do. And a lot of people are so myopically focused on whatever they think they need to be focused on. They're not really noticing those moments, those exchanges where you're having conversations with her about her life. And that's why she's here getting bangs, because she thinks her bangs are going to do something. It's so funny, Jess. Like I love shopping, like confession. Like I'm a bit of a shopper. I love fashion. I've put on like 5 to 10 pounds lately and nothing fits me. And so low key, I'm not even having as much fun shopping anymore when I go, because I'm like, but I don't like how this feels, like really tight. Yeah. But I don't know, like when I go, there's been this voice in my head lately that's like, what are you doing here? Like, what are you really seeking here? Like, who really cares about this dress? Like, nobody's going to like you more if you have this. Like, what are you going for? And it's interesting because it's almost like, I don't know, you were so much more in touch with this deeper sense of purpose of like real service, like helping people and asking real questions. Do you have any advice for people who are listening and thinking like, I wish that I could look at what I'm doing every day and find a deeper sense of purpose or a deeper sense of why, or I don't know, just like notice those things that you noticed?
I think what's interesting is I had always wished I could do more than just like the external support, right? Great hair, great makeup. I've been on a lot of photo shoots and on behind the scenes, watching how women look at themselves in the mirror. No matter how beautiful I think they look or how put together or how well, this orchestrated photo shoot is going, they are still picking themselves apart. They're still finding things that are not right. And it just would break my heart to the point of where I almost cried on an episode the other day, because I finally really connected my why now to what I'm doing with the coaching aspect behind the scenes of it, to those moments that added up that I didn't really realize they were adding up. So when you ask that question of like using a skill set or knowing what we're doing and then translating it, sometimes it's hard to see in the moment, and you have to sometimes put yourself in other situations to see your gifts or to allow other people to see the gifts that you have. I'm a huge proponent of the outside being the first place you start when you want to build confidence. For sure, it's the easiest place to start, but the internal confidence comes with a lot of hard work a lot of times, and acknowledging moments of like those shopping experiences of like, why am I here? What void am I trying to fill, or what thing am I trying to avoid that I'm not paying attention to that could be fixed or filled in a different way besides spending money maybe I don't have, or buying more shit that I'm never going to use, that again, no one else cares about. So, getting to the real meat and potatoes of, what are holding people back from fully expressing themselves or feeling really confident in their bodies. even if they're 10 pounds heavier. So, it really started with that, and then wanting to create a bigger impact, knowing that I could only do one person at a time. Whereas if I took my business, my mission, my vision, my purpose, kind of my message on a larger scale with the podcast, I could definitely reach more people and hopefully leave a bigger impact that would have a ripple effect in people in their lives too.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And like, the thing is, not everybody's really motivated by impact, right? Like, and it's okay. I actually feel some impact shame because my partner, Neil, he's so like on a mission. He's such a visionary that I'm like, you're so impactful. And sometimes I feel like I'm like, do I really want to make an impact compared to you? Like I get this comparisonitis where he wants to change the world. And sometimes I look at his schedule and I'm like, that's a crazy schedule. And when my schedule is crazy, I'm not proud of that. I'm like, I want this thing to chill out. Like this is not, and it's not that he judges me in any way, but he definitely kind of like looks at my world and he's like, you could do so much. You're so competent. You're so capable. Change the world. So also just like fun note for anybody listening, like you're enough with or without what you're doing, obviously. Okay, so speaking of purpose, you've flexed and flowed with your career. And I think a lot of people do that. And I feel like podcasting is such a powerful thing that can kind of like hold you through those changes. So
when you think about businesses growing their sales beyond forecasts, you probably think about a product with very high demand, a very focused brand, and influence-driven marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business making selling simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Shopify is home to the number one checkout on the planet, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So if you're growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout brands like Mattel and Heinz use. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/U-turn, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/U-turn to upgrade your selling today. Again, that's shopify.com/YOUTURN, shopify.com/U-turn.
tell me a little bit about like that decision to make the podcast and like, I don't know, anything that we could tell for anybody listening that maybe this is for them to be considering. Like, I don't think there's any networking tool out there better than a podcast at all.
Nope, I agree. And I want to side note what you just said about your career and the comparisonitis. If you are in a relationship where someone you're with is exceedingly more, like you said, focused on that impact. My partner's the same way. It's the first time I'm experiencing this in a relationship. It's fairly new, 3.5 years. And every day he does something impactful, like he's mentoring and coaching and gets to lead a huge team of people and he gets to speak and do all these things. And he's constantly sharing all of that with me. And I'm the same as you, whereas my calendar's crazy. I'm like, But also we sometimes are in different seasons of our life. And you've done amazing shit that's been super impactful when you were really young, and your TED Talks are continuously giving that impact in ways that you don't even have to show up for anymore, Ashley. And so I think, side note, when we're so far removed from what we've actually created, this is the virality of what can happen if you do a TED Talk, even like with the mentorship of someone like Ashley, is the residual effect, like a great book or even content from a podcast that will live on far longer than you or a single post on social media. So the impact a podcast can have, and the reason I actually wanted to start one was because, truth be told, when I joined that mastermind, I already thought, maybe I wanted to get out of the beauty industry. But before I quote unquote left, I wanted to coach back into an industry that I deeply loved and felt honored to quote unquote like be raised by. Again, I was 19 when I started. So I was like, if I could help all stylists make at least 6 figures, I would feel really proud of that legacy, or be able to like share with them what a 6-figure mindset really looks like. I quickly learned that most people in my industry thought 6 figures meant just 100,000, not $999,000. And so I was personally responsible for changing that for everybody in the beauty industry. So I started a course. Nobody knew me though for a course creator. Nobody knew me as a coach. Nobody knew me other than a salon owner. So how do you think that launch went? Crickets.
Yeah.
Even when I tried to talk about it more on social media, it wasn't really moving. And so I knew I had to go back to the drawing board and create a platform where people could actually get to know me and I could really become visible. And it created content for me to share on social. Here's my podcast. Here's my perspective. Here's me giving free value. Here's me serving you in a way that's not asking for anything other than a follow for on return. And so with doing that work, with creating a presence and showing my personal expertise of just how I thought about things, it allowed for me the next time I launched something for it to actually do well. And so I started to get people buying into my one-on-one coaching and asking if I could coach them on other aspects of business. And so that's where things really started to move. And I knew that I should have done that in the beginning, but I didn't. I didn't know how to create visibility. I didn't build my behind the chair business with social media. So again, 43, kind of missed that, had clients for 15, 20 years, didn't really have to do much of that. So I did have to do it in the later years, starting a new business. And the podcast was the platform that helped me do it. And in all of that, when I started, like I said, I didn't really know what I was doing or who I was speaking to. I didn't have a niche audience. I didn't have a quote unquote perfect product to sell. I just wanted to talk to people. So about 45 episodes in, it started to feel kind of out of alignment. I was like, I really want to help more early stage entrepreneurs, but right now I'm only talking to the beauty industry. What if I changed the name and rebranded everything and included everybody else while still including my beauty industry people who are also entrepreneurs? So that's where the name change came about 2 years ago. Now we rebranded to Unscripted. So originally it was called the Beauty Inspires Beauty Podcast. So fun fact, you can rebrand, you can pivot and change as like different iterations of you and your business kind of come down the pipeline. You're currently showing on social that you've kind of playing around with different cover arts and kind of rebranding yourself. So I think that's the cool thing about podcasting and social is like you can keep becoming a newer version of yourself while still growing your brand.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Okay. So I feel like a lot of people probably have some like perfectionism with what you're sharing of like, well, just the other day I was posting my podcast thumbnail art and I've never gotten such response. It was so much fun to see people caring about like my podcast art. I feel like the perfectionism could go haywire with like, how do we get this right? What do I call my show? Do you know what's so crazy? I couldn't sleep last night because Neil's out of town and I'm like getting really used to sleeping next to him the past year. And it was just so quiet in the house and I'm jet lagged. So I was like up like like I was just out of it at 3 a.m. And I was having this flashback of U-Turn podcast. I don't know why this came up the day before this interview about podcasting, and it was the second episode I recorded with the CEO of Walmart.com. Great guy. His name was Carter Cast. And by the way, everybody, she mentions Chris Harder. He's one of my favorite episodes too. He's on the show and so is Lori. So check it out. Chris talks about money. Lori talks about, everything amazing. But I remember I called the U-Turn podcast. This is so embarrassing. I called it, like I love dance class and hip hop and rap music. And I remember I was like so in my career coach identity that I wanted to call it Get to Work, but that felt like too serious and I'm not a serious person. So I called it Get to Twerk. And like, and I remember my second episode, I'm interviewing this like CEO of Walmart and I'm like doing my intro with him live on the line. And I'm like, so friends, if you can't work it out, twerk it out. Like I just heard him laugh.
That's amazing. That is the best story I've ever heard. But you know what I thought of at first when you said Get to Work was a Jane Fonda episode of like, see how old I am? Like, get to work. I was thinking of like you and Aaliyah.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah,
that's because I know this version of Ashley versus like your serious version before in career coach mode only.
God.
So I think your listeners probably are like, oh, the Get to Twerk makes way more sense, girl. Let's bring that back.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also just like, I don't know, it's one of those things where you realize like, you don't have to be perfect. And like, I look so polished right now. I think I do. Maybe I don't. People are like, girl, you're not. But my website, I feel like it's looking pretty good for Wise Whisper Agency. My Instagram is about to up level. We got the social media people's social media-ing with me. I'm doing the videos. I'm doing the stuff, which I have mixed feelings about because I don't know how I feel about being a social media person in any way. It sounds kind of narcissistic to say that. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's like I'm all over it, right? But anyway, I guess it's just like anybody listening, it's so hard to go into it and like not hold on to it too tightly. So I think just perfectionism.
Mhm.
How did you get started? Because I know it could be overwhelming as far as like, what do I call it? What is my art? Who do I have on? How do I get people to say yes to me when I, haven't had this? Like anything about that.
Well, the comparison part of just like wanting it to be perfect or kind of like getting in your own way, that part is hard. And if you are a perfectionist or maybe even a people pleaser and you really care what other people think, you're gonna have a hard time making a final decision on an edit, especially if you did a rad photo shoot and there's 5 pictures to choose from. If you don't have branding, colors, and fonts picked out already, you're gonna be all over the place, excuse my language. So getting your brand dialed in first and foremost before you launch your show, if you want them to coincide with one another, and they should, I think they should. It should be part of your personal branding that funnels into your business. Now, if it's completely separate, that's a whole nother story. But if you have some of that stuff dialed in already, it should make it a little bit easier for the vibe you want to have on the cover art. And therefore, what topics are you going to be talking about? Does your cover art match like what that is going to relate to? Because people to make a 2-3 second judgment on the thumbnail, then they read the title and then they decide if it's for them or not. So, you can make edits on your podcast cover art. You can change the name. You can change your trailer even. You can change your show description. You can change it all. So if it's the thing getting in your way from starting, I say rip the Band-Aid off, come up with the most obnoxious name you can think of and just do it. I think Get to Twerk is probably still available. So if you want to borrow that from Ashley, I say go for it.
You can have
you know what
it,
I mean?
everybody.
But like, that's the cool thing about like, again, stuff like we can do anything to make money. We can do anything to promote ourselves on social media. We could all get half naked and post crazy pictures of ourselves and get attention. So what is the point of your podcast? What are you trying to do with it? And if that takes you out of the equation, who are you serving and what do they want to see from you? That should answer those questions and kind of get you out of your own way and out of your own head, because your business is probably not about you. It's about the impact that it's going to have on the people you're serving. So take your ego out of it for just a second, remove your pride just a little bit, and don't look at what anybody else is doing and kind of choose what you're putting out there for the people that you're serving. If hot pink and like lime green aren't your professionals that you're trying to speak to, maybe you tone the colors down a little bit. Maybe if like, tits out isn't really going to attract the right audience, that's not what you do. So again, like it should help you make decisions a little bit better, but get that out of the way and just launch your first trailer and get your episode up there.
Okay, what are like the pieces to put into place if we could just give everybody a playbook of where to get started with their podcast?
Great. Well, I have a free resource you guys can have. It's called
Yes.
3 Reasons to Start a Podcast and 1 Reason Not to. I'll give you the tagline. It's if you can't be consistent. That's the one reason you shouldn't start a podcast, because you don't want to fall into the trap of like, oh, I'm one of the statistics. You guys just fudge the numbers up for us. So please don't start if you're not going to like at least make it past episode 20. With that being said, you won't know you like podcasting until you try it. So you could be like me, and I recorded my first 25 episodes. I'm not saying you need to do this before I ever launched my show. And the reason why I batched out so many episodes was so that they all coincided with the same kind of theme, really positioning me as the expert in the beauty industry, speaking to the exact ideal client that I wanted. So I didn't give myself a chance to like throw just spaghetti at the wall. I had intention behind the podcast. Now, I think 6 to 7 episodes batch is the best place to start. You want to drop the first 5 to 6 episodes right away, so that if somebody finds you by the wonderful chance that they're on Apple or Spotify that day, they can binge listen to your show, become an immediate fan or not, right? You might not be for them, but that's great to know. And they can follow and like your show right away. And right away, that's 6 downloads instead of just 1 if they find you. So there's like little tips and tricks that you can do, especially on like launch day, but you don't even need a mic these days, but best practices are all in that freebie. You can get, I have the Shure MV7 mic. That's my favorite. There's a whole lot of cool mics out there that are far less expensive. I have 2 cheap little ring lights that I set up if you want to do video, which I highly suggest. You literally can do all of this on your phone if you wanted to, but most of us have a computer or laptop, and that's all you need. You can record on Zoom. I use a platform called Riverside, which is pretty inexpensive. It translates it for you. You can edit on there. You can pull clips out of it. There are so many apps that you can use to pull media off of it to promote your podcast. And the second most important thing is to not just be the best kept secret podcast by not marketing your show onto your social media or potentially driving traffic to an email list. You want to talk about your show. You want to get on regularly, even if you're only doing 1 episode a week, as often as you can, always referencing episodes that you just did. Ashley did a great example. She just referenced 3 different episodes on this show. So not only are you listening to the show, she just told you to go listen to the Chris Harder one about money, the Lori Harder one, because she's amazing. And then who was the third person? Oh, the CEO of Walmart. She said that was a fun interview. So it's a great way to just keep spreading the seeds of what you've put out. and you don't have to do it again, right? So I think social media has been a really fun platform for me to share my podcast and to bring people along and turn them from just an audience to a community. So I call my podcast now the Unscripted Community. And it's what I sold out my last mastermind with, because these women had been listening to my show for the last 6, 8, 10 months, really connected with me and who I was. And they were waiting for me to drop an offer for them to get to work with me. So there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with the show. But again, you can start for really, really cheap. You could literally Google your way to starting. You can figure out how to edit it, or you can hire a production company. And they're really not that much these days to edit and produce your show. So all you're doing is sitting down, creating the content. And if you have like an adversity to putting your face on camera, you don't have to do that either. Most people listen to podcasts with audio and they don't ever even need to see your face. But I think you're missing a little something there if you don't put your face with the podcast.
Okay, that's really helpful. And as far as guests go, I think people really struggle, especially in the beginning, to make sense of like, how do we get guests that are really, really high quality to want to be a yes for us? Like, what are some of your biggest tips for choosing and curating who that is, and also like getting a yes from people?
Yes, great question. So I started off with a really warm market, right? The people I was speaking to, I knew my local audience. So I knew the first like 30 people I wanted to have on my show. So depending on like the outline of how your show goes, so if you're doing solo episodes or guest episodes, you kind of want to have them fall in line with your brand pillars, if you will. So making sure you're speaking to the content that people know your podcast for. So whatever that show description talks about, you want to find people that can add value in a variety of different ways and support either what you're saying or kind of bring new conversation to the table that you're not an expert in. But you will look like the expert because you're facilitating these conversations on your show. So I think for me in the beginning, getting guests was really easy because I had a warm market of people and they were open to saying yes to it. So don't be afraid to ask. People are excited to have an opportunity to talk about themselves. Everybody loves to talk about themselves. So you'll be surprised at how many yeses you get, even if you have a brand new show. If you've already grown your social media and you can kind of leverage that you have a platform to share these brand new episodes on, that can also give you a foot in the door with somebody who might not normally say yes to a brand new show. But I know a lot of people who have pretty big Instagrams who have started a show and been able to get top name guests. So I think, give yourself some grace when you're asking. Don't expect an immediate yes. People are busy. If you have to follow up, do that. If you get a not right now, again, just make a list. We have a little tally sheet that I keep on the back end of my Google Doc with all of these prospective people that I want to have on the show that and their relevancy. When we had the agency, we really did a lot of PR work for some of our clients, getting them with the right guests, getting them on the right shows. And so really, again, social media, you can look for people. And then there's also teams of people that can do this kind of work for you to find you good guests and then to also get your ass guesting on other people's shows so you can cross-pollinate audiences to grow your show faster. That key piece is really important. And it wasn't something I did in the beginning and I wish I would have, because I know it would have grown my show faster.
Okay, another thing that you kind of touched on is just growing your show. And I feel like that's the number one question I get from people. I'm a big believer, like you put good shit out there, eventually it gets noticed and you just keep going, and it's a timeline thing. And even at the beginning, when you don't feel like you have anybody listening, you're still the person. If you decide you're going to keep going, that is going to win. So you could already feel your win and live from it. But I think a lot of people don't necessarily tune into that and they feel a little bit overwhelmed at like, how do we get listeners? So there's actually a whole world of that, right? Like you can put ads behind your show and pour a bunch of cash into getting, buying listeners. But what are some ways that you've really thought about growing your show that have worked or that you found have been useful?
Yeah, that what I just touched on is I think the most important thing is these micro podcasters, even if they're only getting 25 to 50 downloads, that's if you have a podcast and essentially is the top funnel piece of your marketing, could you take on 20 to 50 new clients right now? That's how I always remind my friends that are starting their podcast is 25 to 50 downloads on a brand new show is really good. Being consistent is also really good in a variety of ways. Are you consistently delivering the content you said you were going to deliver? Are you consistently sharing it on social media? People will start to find you and want to get on your show and ask you to be on their show, which then these podcast swaps are really helpful in the beginning of growing your show, because if someone else already has a like audience and you can get in front of just their 50 or 100 downloads, it's going to expedite the process of you growing your show. Do I think working with, say, Google Ads with people who know what they're doing for podcasts can help also? For sure. If you've got the money, why not test it? Obviously, that might take you some trial and error, but I think you doing the guerrilla marketing yourself is going to move the needle faster. This is non-scalable shit that just has to get done. Lewis Howes talked about this all the time in the beginning. He's someone I studied. where he would say after every episode I recorded or one that would drop, I would think to myself of like 10 to 15 people specifically that were maybe in my network that I could send this episode to and leave a voice note. Hey, Ashley, I just recorded this episode. It dropped today. I was thinking of you and how it might help you in your life or business. It would mean the world to me if you would give it a listen. Let me know what you think and maybe even share it on social media. So even at the level he was at growing his show, he still took the time every time an episode dropped to send it to somebody personally. And I love that because it reminded me that like the things that are going to help you scale in the long run are usually the non-scalable stuff in the beginning. And that guerrilla personal marketing is going to get you further faster, especially with something as intimate as a podcast.
Okay. You have a mastermind. I would love to help people understand, how did you go from just like interviews to like actually making money? I remember my first sponsor came to me during the COVID, and I'd really just advertised like my courses and things I was doing. And it was like such a crazy moment. I remember making $1,000 a month, felt like I was rich. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I get to be paid by anybody to just have conversations. That's crazy. Like I think it was with you, I was saying when I was writing my book, I'm like, oh, I have writer's block. And my mom was like, you don't have talking block. And like, just trying to like get me out of it. But it's funny, like to do something that's so natural to you and just to get paid. So I don't know, like what was the moment for you, or where were you at? Because I think people think, I need enough listeners, I need more before I advertise something. Or they feel that feeling of like, I don't want one person to sign up for a 10-person thing. And then I got to like move mountains to get 9 more humans. Like they don't want to jump the gun on advertising something too soon or taking on a sponsor. What's your thinking around that?
Again, I think it's all trial and error. You'll know when something feels aligned or it won't. That happened to me too. I had a beauty brand reach out to me and ask if I would run ads for them. They had never done anything like this before. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, yeah, how's $50 an episode sound? I think I had like 15 episodes. I didn't even know what I was doing. And they were like, yeah, sounds great. I was like, I'll even throw in a social media post for you. And they were like, wonderful. So, I was dropping 2 episodes a week. So a couple $100 a month. It paid for the production of the show. I felt really good about it. And then after a while, I asked for an affiliate, which then after one who would sign up, I would get a bigger percentage off of that. So we renegotiated that contract and they were with me for a while. I was always cautious about putting too many ads outside of my own products and services on my show just because I didn't want to oversaturate people, but I did want to get them used to hearing some sort of ads on my show from the very beginning. So I was mindful that that's what I wanted to do. Now, if you're Andy Frisella and you're never like going to put an ad on your show, that's a whole different thing, right? But Joe Rogan doesn't get paid $100,000 an episode by not promoting other people's products. He usually owns half of whatever products he's selling because people know the value of bringing him into their business. Which leads me to one of my next big sponsors that came to me. The guy was on my podcast. He loved my energy. He loved what I did, who I spoke to. We had similar audiences. He knew he could sell his products to my listeners. So he's like, hey, what if we partner up? Here's our budget. How does this work for you? So the budget was less than the amount of episodes I did per month. So I gave him 3 ad spots a month versus like the 8 that I put out. And then I shared it on social and he actually paid me an additional fee for anything I posted on stories or in my hard posts. So you can leverage your social media also, even if your podcast downloads aren't as high as like some of the numbers to convert to say $1,000 an episode or more for each, guest spot or ad spot. But the more downloads you get, the more you can charge for your ad spaces. And again, reaching out to other brands, like I had Kai Fragrance reach out to me because they just liked what I posted. One day I shared their product. My mom bought me a gift box. So they sent me like a couple $1,000s worth of product to create stuff for them and then never followed up. Right. So you never know how you can get, I mean, it's weird how different brands work. Some want contracts. But I do always think that selling your own products and services was one of the best ways because especially if you have anything, but you could totally monetize and make 6 figures by never selling any of your own shit. So if you love to influence and you love to share other people's products and services, then a podcast is a beautiful way to make a great living, sharing the stuff that you love.
Contracts and contacts. I feel like that's the name of a podcast.
I know. And Chris always says contracts keep friends. So if you sell any of your friends' stuff, make sure you get a contract and like set realistic expectations of what people can expect. Like I had one company, I hit them up because I really loved their products. I used it was like bars or whatever. And they were a pretty well-known brand. I won't name names, but the guy, like, he's like, yeah, we'll test you out. We'll run 3 ad spots. And I'm like, I know no one's going to buy after only 3 ads. So I'm not even going to take that bet. Thanks, but no thanks. I said, give me at least 8. So I wanted that brand deal bad enough that I gave him 8 for the price of like 4 or something, just so I could leverage my whatever. So it worked out in my favor. He ended up sponsoring a couple of my events, sending tons of free product. So it's interesting how you can really utilize making money and also like getting a lot of stuff for free that might support your business somehow with the podcast. It's pretty cool.
I love what you're sharing. And I feel like this is such good mindset for people to realize. And for those of you who don't know, with ads, like there's the intro ad that's kind of like after you do the intro of the show. There's the mid-roll where you interrupt people. That's the most valuable because obviously people are paying attention. I think there's the outro, which is probably the least valuable because people start to tune out when the show is over. They can feel the conversation ending. This has been such a fun conversation. Is there anything you would want everybody to know as they're thinking about starting their show, thinking about making that move?
I definitely encourage anybody who's interested in starting a podcast to just ask more questions. Feel free to hit me in the DMs. If you have more questions, happy to answer those, or you probably can just click the link and get the free resource. If it looks like a lot, it kind of is, but once you dial in and it's super easy to do, it's plug and play, it's super repeatable. You can set up all the automations to edit the show yourself and post it. Or again, you can ask for help and pay people to do the production, which is like technically the thing that holds most people back. But honestly, don't start a podcast just to start a podcast. If you think you need to have one, but you don't really want one, don't start it. You can go guest your ass off on other people's shows and have just as much of an impact. Go write a book, do a TED Talk, like do lives. If you think that the consistency thing is going to be a problem, I would say don't even bother because it is a long game. It's long form content and it's a long game. So I definitely think twice before you do something just because everyone else is doing it. But with that, if you felt a little bit of challenge when I just said that, maybe it's time for you to start your podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming onto the show.
For sure. That was fun.
And where can everybody find you? Like, where's the spot, the best spot? I know you have your freebie, which we'll put in the show notes, but where else can we go?
Yeah, you can tune in twice a week with me on the Unscripted podcast. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, or on my Instagram where I post it all the time. It has its own Instagram page. And then my name's Jessica Burgio on Instagram. Also, I love to hear from you. If you have any ahas or takeaways, or if you're going to start your podcast, let me know so I can support you.
Whoop, whoop. Okay. Thank you again.
Thanks for tuning in to the U-Turn podcast. I hope you learned so much in this episode and you're putting it into action today. We would love to hear from you. Slide into my DMs at Ashley Stahl or leave a written review if you're inspired. It would mean so much to us. Be sure to subscribe to the show because, as you know, the more subscribers we get, the better the guests we can bring you. And in the meantime, if you're looking to skyrocket your personal brand and impact millions, head on over to wisewhisperagency.com to learn more about how we are getting clients booked for the TEDx stage.